This is In-Ear Insights, the Trust Insights podcast. AI Academy for Marketers is an online education platform designed to help marketers like you understand, pilot, and scale artificial intelligence. The AI Academy features deep dive certification courses of 3 to 5 hours, along with dozens of short courses, 30 to 60 minutes each, taught by leading AI and marketing experts. Join Katie Robert, CEO of Trust Insights, and me, Christopher Penn, Chief Data Scientist of Trust Insights, for 3 of our courses in the Academy: 5 use cases of AI for content marketing, intelligent attribution modeling for marketing, and detecting and mitigating bias in marketing AI. The Academy is designed for manager-level and above marketers and largely caters to non-technical audiences, meaning you don't need a programming background or a background in data science to understand and apply what you learn. One registration gives you unlimited access to all the courses, an invitation to a members-only Slack instance, and access to new courses every quarter. Join now and save $100 off registration when you go to trustinsights.ai/AI Academy and use registration code PEN100 today. That's trustinsights.ai/AI Academy and use registration code PEN100 today. In this week's In-Ear Insights, Katie is back after a week off. Last week we had John Wall on the show. Katie, what happened, and what does your brain come up with on vacation that is worth sharing?
So what happened? What happened was I took 10 days off and spent a lot of time in the woods and a lot of time sitting on my deck, and it was fantastic. And one of the reasons why it was fantastic is because it really sort of cleared all of the clutter out. And I was able to focus in on this, idea that I had for content where, I really want to dig into all the different aspects of leadership. Now, leadership is not a new topic. It's not something that hasn't been covered. It's been covered a lot, but it's uniquely my point of view. And so I want to take a crack at it. And this was inspired by what's going on in the world politically, but I don't want it to be a political post because leadership is something that, we all deal with on a regular basis. Some of us are unwilling leaders. Some of us, wanted to be leaders from, day one. And so I really want to start to dig into what does all of that look like? What are the defining characteristics versus more of the, less defining things? What are the soft skills, the hard skills? How can you learn to be a leader? What are the lessons from leadership? So it just sort of like really thinking about it, because I think what ends up happening is, there's a lot of the term leader gets thrown around a lot. It's misused, it's overused, it's people wanting the title. And your title does not necessarily mean that you yourself are a leader. And so I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding and things that I want to clear up about it as best I can. And so, I want to start to pick apart things like, me versus we, or, the because I said so, because I'm the leader, so you have to do what I say, versus really getting that team input, where diversity plays a factor. Do you need to know everything? How can you always have the answer? Where you can play to your strengths, the insecurities, like all of those different things. And so, I'm going to spend some time really outlining it. But Chris, you and I talk about leadership a lot. What are your, immediate reactions to the topic of leadership? Or do you have any strong opinions without getting political?
Yes, I do. There's 2 different branches in my head. There's sort of the academic side, which is like all the definitions and models and frameworks and stuff that I personally love. And then there's the emotional side. And that one is I use the same definition of leadership as the Supreme Court did for pornography. You can't define it, but you know it when you see it, right? I think the same is true of leadership. You know it when you see it from an emotional perspective. Somebody does something or takes a role, and you feel good about what it is that they're doing, even if it's not necessarily the exact way you would do it. You'd say, okay, that person's doing it. But there's a general hesitation I think we have as humans where we don't necessarily want to be. Not all of us want to be out in front all the time, right? Because that's who gets shot at first. So it takes a type of motivation to get somebody to step up and take on that role. And I think one of the things that is worth unpacking is what is the motivation to do that? Again, not to get overly political, but different people have different reasons for wanting to be a leader. Sometimes it's ego. Sometimes it is, absolute corruption, and they just want to self-serve, deal themselves the best hand possible. Sometimes it's people are so in pain and they don't see anyone else stepping up. They're like, well, somebody's got to fix this problem. I guess I will, because nobody else is doing it. That's sort of like that unwilling leader. And then there are those, I think that management folks like to call them the servant leaders, the folks who are like, yeah, I want to help everybody, advance forward. I want to make things better for me, but I want to make them better for me by making them better for everybody else. Sort of the idea of enlightened self-interest. Like, yeah, if I, the classic example, if I don't like homelessness, if I help the city build a homeless shelter, then I don't have to deal with homelessness anymore on the street, but I've done so in a way that makes the world a better place. And that's certainly the model of leadership that I've been following for a few decades, because it's the way that the martial arts tradition I practice advocates for leadership, is figure out how to align your goals with helping other people win, and then other people naturally want you to win.
Now, do you feel like, and this might be a loaded question, but do you feel like if someone is put in a team lead position, that they are then by default the leader and you have to do what they say?
So it depends. There's within an organization, the folks over at Manager Tools have a really good delineation. There's two types of power. There's relationship power and there's role power. And what you're describing is role power. You're put in this position, you have to use the power of the role to get things done. Do as I say, kind of things, which we know from basic interpersonal theory is not necessarily the greatest motivator. The better motivator is that relationship power. Hey, I've built a relationship with you so much so that you want to do what I've asked you to do, or you may even say, hey, here's an even better way of doing it. And if I'm a good team lead, I should say, okay, yeah, that is the better way. Like, going back to our own personal history, as soon as you came on board on my team at the old shop, you're like, wow, you really suck at hiring people.
I want to say that's not verbatim, but I'm pretty sure it is.
And I said, well, guess what? Now you're in charge of hiring because you're better at it than I am. And so part of building a good leader is helping them understand there is a balance between relationship and role power. You can have relationship power without role power, but it's better to have both if you can.
I agree with that. One of the things that I've always struggled with, and this is my own, personal ego that I have to check, is people telling me, no, you can't go talk to that person. You are at a lower level, for example. So, in almost every role that I've had, someone has tried to, play that card of the hierarchy. And I do respect the hierarchy, but I do find that there are times when the hierarchy gets in the way of problems getting solved and productivity. And so, a couple of jobs ago, I was a product manager and in charge of this, $3 million product. And the VP of sales would always say, no, you can't talk to the client until we find someone who is at the same level as you. And I always took such issue with that for multiple reasons. And that's sort of a bigger thing to unpack. But in my head, I was like, but I'm the one who knows the most about what the product does. Why am I not allowed to talk to the client just because I don't have the same title as you? So if I don't have a VP in front of my title, I'm not even allowed to step foot in the room. And I just always thought that that was insane. Because I've always been a firm believer of, you put the right people in the right, scenarios and everybody will be successful. And so then when I got to agency life, I found very quickly that it wasn't very different. And I, had someone on my team who was maybe, at a junior entry level. They had a question. I was like, oh, well, go ask the VP of the different team, whatever your question is. And that VP immediately called me into their office and said, how dare you send a junior person to ask me a question? I don't talk to junior people. And I looked at him, I was like, are you insane? Did you or did you not have the answer to her question within 5 seconds? Like, get over yourself. This is insane. And so I find that a lot of times, Chris, to your point about role power, it's very misunderstood as to how that should work. And so a lot of people go into it thinking, well, I now have ultimate power, therefore what I say goes. And if I don't want to be bothered by junior people asking me questions, I can then put five other people in the way to make sure that I'm not bothered because I'm now in a position of power. And I just think that that whole notion is bullshit.
Hmm. A lot of it has to do too, also with culture, and this extends even to sort of national or country level culture. One of the things that it was sort of the biggest challenges for the Japanese martial arts when they made the migration to Western countries is a change in the understanding of how we work as people. In Japan, for example, your teacher may give you a promotion early and you have a sense of honor and a sense of shame, like you have not lived up to that rank. Like they'll give you your first degree black belt. And so culturally, you work your butt off. You double the amount of time you spend training and stuff like that until you've earned your way into that rank, and your teacher says, yep, I knew that was what it would take to motivate you, that sense of shame that you were being given an honor you didn't deserve. When they started doing that with Americans in particular, it went completely haywire because that's not how we work. Our culture is one of you you work your way up the ladder and you get the thing after you've done the time to get the thing, as opposed to getting the honor and then feeling you have to work, you have to earn your way into it. And so in organizations, it's challenging because you will have people who are given the role, but for one reason or another, they're not ready for the role. And the question is, will that person grow into that, or will, as you've experienced, it kind of go the other way? I remember I was talking to this one person who worked at HubSpot, and they were talking at one point, they're saying they wanted to approach one of their senior executives. And the senior executive sent an email to their boss saying, this person has not earned the right to talk to me. And I'm like, a little full of ourselves, aren't we? That person no longer works at HubSpot. But wow, that's a case where role power is clearly at the forefront of this person's mind. Relationship power is not present at all. Like this person had no understanding of how to build relationships, clearly.
Well, and I think that that's a really great example because power does not equal leadership. And I think that, that's, one of the many things that I do want to spend some time unpacking is that there's this misunderstanding that if you are put in a position of quote unquote power, and I think power is also one of those words that, people latch onto, like, I want power, I need this power, I need that power in order to get things done. That doesn't necessarily translate because if you are put in that role power position, but you're not a leader or you're not, someone that people respect, doesn't matter. Shit's not going to get done because nobody wants to do whatever it is that you say. And, we see a lot of examples of that, and so having a title almost kind of means nothing if you, the person, can't do the work and you don't understand the team and you're not someone who is respected. And I think that there's a lot of different elements. And so I think it's a very interesting topic. Go ahead.
The title thing is really important because titles are heuristics, right? They're ways for us to make snap judgments. If the initials
Right.
in front of your name are CEO, I have certain expectations, and then if you don't live up to those expectations, it's actually, in some ways, the title can set you back because you're clearly, this person here is not a CFO. They don't behave like a CFO. They behave like a junior analyst at best. How they got that title, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of startups struggle. Like, someone will say, like, I'm a chief data scientist. Yeah, but you're 22, and you did not go to college at 14. You don't have you weren't Doogie Howes. You didn't get a PhD at 18. How do you match up that
Mm-hmm.
disparity between the title that you've claimed for yourself and what other people have done in that role that defines the expectations of you? And I think, to your point, that's where leadership can go really, really haywire. Like, for just a fun aside, like, why did we make you the CEO of the company?
We took a long look at the role of the CEO and what is expected of a CEO. And I think, from my opinion, we really tried to make sure that we were matching strengths And, when we actually took a look at, the things that typically a CEO has to do in terms of setting the strategy, managing the process, overseeing the people, the overall health of the organization, those are things that I am naturally stronger at, or that I have worked to be stronger at. And, you are so great at, the innovations and, the data detectiveness and working with clients and really understanding what it is that, you know, the data is trying to do and the new things and AI and machine learning that, you know, even though you have more years on paper work experience, I have more experience in the role of CEO than you did. And so that was one of the reasons why we decided that. And I've always wanted to be a CEO. But to that point, I then made the conscious decision to take on that role with the expectations. Was I ready to be a CEO? Is anybody ever really ready? You have to continue to grow into it, as you were saying. And I think that it does come with a certain, whatever letters are behind your name, your title, there are expectations. And I think that just calling yourself something doesn't automatically make you the thing. And I think that I'm confident that you and I would have both decided that if neither of us were ready to be a CEO, we would have looked for someone else who was.
Yeah, I think the idea of running the organization and building the organization, those things that, are not at all my strengths. Finding the best people to complement a team, also, hiring, not my strength. And so it's an important part of leadership is to understand what are the expectations in any given role. If someone makes you a manager or a director in a company, what are the expectations that come with that? And one of the things that I think almost every organization totally fails at is they don't define the soft skills expectations for any given role. There's the obvious stuff like, hey, you need to have this number of leads, or you need to have this amount of revenue, or your productivity numbers have to be X, Y, or Z. But at no point does somebody say, hey, you have to treat your employees with kindness, where you have to, reduce the number of complaints against you by 50% this year. And without that quantification and understanding of the soft skills, I think you do set a lot of people up to fail in management positions and certainly in leadership positions. If you said, hey, one of the expectations of the CEO is that you will build relationships with other people in the company, at every level. If that wasn't made clear, then you'll have situations where you can have people saying, oh yeah, you're not qualified to talk to me, sorry. And that creates organizational chaos.
It does. And so Chris, the first question you asked me was, what are the things that were rolling around in my brain over vacation? And it all started with me taking a look inward at myself and my role. And, we are almost 3 years into having Trust Insights. And so, I'm constantly trying to make sure that I am fulfilling the expectations, but also that I am doing what I need to do as a leader, especially when I'm getting ready to change processes and change roles and, in some ways flip things in the company upside down. Well, why should you guys listen to me? You and John both have way more experience in marketing than I do. So why does my perspective count at all? And so really making sure that I have enough data to back up the reasons why I want to make certain changes and the plans and the measurements and all of those things. And that's honestly, that's really where the topic for me started to sort of come together as this thing that's bigger than just what I'm working on, because it was really challenging me to think like, why should they listen to me at all? Why do they see me as a leader? What are the things that I bring to the table that make people who have more experience than me feel comfortable putting me in a leadership position? And so it's where it started.
It's true, because you're literally the youngest person in the company.
Uh-huh.
So to wrap up, understanding what the kind of leader you are, or the kind of leader you've been asked to be, is important, knowing the different types and understanding the different types, and knowing how good you are at managing the balance between role power and relationship power are essentials for being a good leader, being a good manager, or frankly, just being a good employee, because you can have relationship power without role power and still get things done. If you got questions or comments or things that you want to follow up with about this episode, drop in by our free Slack group over at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. There's over 1,300 other marketers and analysts just like you with questions every day on every topic imaginable related to analytics, marketing, and leadership. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Want help solving your company's data, analytics, and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.